So today we will do a practice. I will slowly lead, not very detailed, but slowly I will lead a practice, and the stages where we need some recitations, we'll do the recitations, and also usually we start with the setting the motivation with the refuge and bodhicitta, holding those two minds. Then that follows with the reciting the Tsering mantra. Then I lead the class. So today we will do slightly different. I will, instead of, setting motivation with the refuge and bodhicitta as a separate activity, we will put these two as a part of the main practice, because as you know, out of the four powers, the power of reliance or power of foundation is refuge and the bodhicitta. So instead of putting those two as a starting for the motivation, we will include that as a main part of the class. Then we will have questions and answer period, and there are some questions, written questions that I've got, and also when we have time, we'll have a few live questions, people who like to ask. So that's what we're going to do today, and also next Sunday. So that some stage I may say a little bit detail today, but then the next Sunday I will say the little bit what's called the brave and that part, and then talk about a little bit detail on the other part which I haven't said, which I didn't say today. So two together, two Sunday, leading this practice together. Hopefully we'll have some helpful, meditation, purification meditation based on Vajrasattva deity. Also, it is that my leading will be really very much as the general frame, how to do the purification practice. Then more detail or a little bit change here and there can be done, individually, based on some reading some other texts, receiving some other teachings, and also what you call the elaboration, and or a little bit shorter. It is up to the individuals. You can, you can arrange. Doesn't need to stick exactly, my leading. I'm talking about in the future, when you do the purification practice in a regular basis. My leading will be to set a general frame, and a little bit, the outline, visualization, meditation, and thought process, and so on and so forth. But then later you can, what you call change a little bit here and there according to your need, according to your level and so forth. So that is, so then another, maybe useful to say here is, as I mentioned, during those 6 or 7 sessions on this, on this topic, and those 4 powers: the power of reliance, power of regrets, power of remedial action, and the power of the promise. These 4 powers to be present at the while we are doing the purification practice. It is very, very useful and helpful. Draw the what's called connections from the teachings that you have received from the other subjects. For example, when we talk about the power of reliance, that here refuge and bodhicitta, to make that power of reliance, power of foundation, make that very rich and very profound, then you should, while you have free time, you should sort of explore further, taking refuge, holding the bodhicitta. Then when we do the purification practice, when you need these 2, they will be there in a very profound, in a very rich level. Same as the power of regret, as I mentioned, when I was explaining that part, like the detailed explanation on the law of cause and effect, karma, those I briefly touched on those 4 main outlines. When if you read Tsongkhapa's Great Lamrim or other, the teachings, mainly to understand the law of cause and effect, karma, and through that, then when you do the purification practice, when you need the strong power of regret, then that will be there, very strong and very rich and very profound. Otherwise, as I mentioned before several times, don't know at that stage how can you cultivate, how can you develop deep sense of regret. Not, so like that. So those 4 powers are really, really important to make, make rich, make profound, while we are reading, studying, discussing, the general teachings of the Buddha and the subsequent Buddhist teachers. Then bring here to make the session rich and profound. And that is really something important, which I've shared with you before, and I want to share again here. Then another point is, when these 4 powers are present, within ourselves, then which kind of purification practice, which kind of compassing practice that we would like to do, is really very much individual's choice, individual's level. For example, people who haven't received, who are not that interested in the Vajrayana, as I mentioned before, you can perfectly and completely, you can do the purification practice based on Sutriyana teachings. As our last gathering, as I mentioned, like the in terms of the recitation, 35 Buddhas, and so on and so forth. Or even without any visualization, simply, holding those 4 powers and so on. But then people who like to do have received Vajrayana, not necessarily highest yoga tantra, have received Vajrayana teachings in the Kriya, Charya, and Yoga. You can do Vajrayana purification based on Vajrayana deity like the Vajrasattva without consort, or people who have received highest yoga tantra teachings and practice highest yoga tantra. I'm using that Giluk terminology. In the other traditions may use slightly different terminology, but the meaning is same. People who have received highest yoga tantra teachings, then you can visualize Vajrasattva with the consort, because your level is purification practice, your level is highest yoga tantra level, therefore you are, qualified to visualize Vajrasattva with the consort. So these are some kind of, I'm not saying one is higher than the others. I'm not saying one is more powerful than the others. What I'm saying is having those 4 powers: power of reliance, power of regret, power of remedial action, and the power of promise. Those 4 powers, make as rich as possible within ourselves. Then do the purification practice according to your sort of, the interest, your level. Doesn't need to do something which you are not ready, which you are not that much interested. You can do according to your level, according to your interest. But I am sure purification can take place when we do that with those 4 powers. Oh yeah. So these are some kind of general, more or less repeating, which I have already said several times, during these 6 or 7 sessions together. Oh yeah. So now we are going to start this session, and as we all know, it is very important in the sense very helpful and useful, when we engage, in general, any kind of activities, and in particularly when we engage in spiritual activities, then it is very helpful and useful to make sure our intention, motivation to perform that spiritual practice, so that motivation should be at least a neutral state of mind, if it is possible, a positive, a constructive motivation. In general, particularly in the Tibetan, the Buddhist tradition, quite often those great teachers will say, that I'm going to perform or engage in this practice, for the sake of all living beings, for the sake of all living beings, and in particularly living beings, sentient beings, who are going through very difficult and very tough times. Like, for example, currently, the world is going through very turbulent times, and particularly, the man-made disaster like war, the millions of people are in a very, very difficult time. So thinking about my purification, this particular practice is purification practice. Today I'm going to engage with this purification practice to benefit, to help, to support all living beings, all sentient beings, and in particularly all the sentient beings who are going through very tough and difficult times, to purify their difficulties, their challenges, physical, mental, whatever difficulties that they are going through, to at least, from our side, whether in reality it is going to ease, or not from our side, with that kind of motivation, to ease, to pacify the difficulties, gross, mental, and physical difficulties, and in the long term, to have the genuine, long-lasting sense of peace, sense of the calm, to experience sense of calmness and peace. So, for example, having that kind of strong, positive mind, setting as a main, starting motivation. And then here, particularly, within the Buddhist practice, and there are two ways to perform the practice. On the one hand, to enhance all those helpful and useful realizations, such as love, compassion, altruism, wisdom, realizing emptiness. On the other hand, to reduce, to minimize, all those unwholesome, unhealthy mental states, such as, strong anger, hatred, the ignorance, attachment, aversion, and so on and so forth, and also, the actions committed, created out of those afflictions, and the seeds or propensities left by those afflictions to purify, to particularly within ourselves and within all those living beings, particularly those people deliberately creating the troubles due to aggressive anger, jealousy, envy, ignorance, those to be purified, those to be reduced, initially minimized, and people who are suffering due to the those actions, those people, those sentient living beings, to be experience due to the reduction, purification of those aggressive manners, aggressive attitudes, those ignorance, reduction of those living beings to experience peace and calm. So think about that. Then now focus on the purification. And here oneself as a meditator, and one's action here is meditation. mentally meditate, visualize, verbally do the recitation, and also visualize the deities, and all those aggressive attitude, ignorance, attachment, aversion, and all those, what you call the afflictions, those actions, those such as causing pain and sufferings. All these are, though they due to the cause and effect, due to the many different what you call dimensions, there are these activities taking place as a meditation, as a meditator, as a meditation of deity, as a the pain and suffering to be purified there through the interaction, through the many different causes and conditions. Yet these are not intrinsic, these are not inherent, these are not in and of themselves. They all come into beings, come into existence due to many different factors. And that understanding, the absence or empty of intrinsic, inherent entity, oneself as a meditator, the Vajrasattva as a meditation of deity, the activity as a meditation, and those afflictions, those the negative actions, and the propensities to be purified. They all are not something intrinsic, inherent, or in and of themselves as a meditation of deity, as a afflictions to be purified, as a meditator. So in other words, try to bring a strong sense of understanding of all these factors are the nature of dependently arising, not independently existed, instead completely dependently arising or occurring and taking dependently existence. So bring that kind of strong feeling or strong sense of absence of intrinsic, inherent meditation of deity, and the negativities to be purified. From that sphere of absence of intrinsic, inherent nature, then oneself as a meditator above 4 inches, one's own head. Visualize a syllable palm. And the syllable palm transforms into a white lotus. Not very small, also not very large. Size, 1 feet size Vajrasattva can be seated upon the lotus. That size of open lotus flower. At the center of the lotus, syllable R. And the syllable R transforms into a moon disc, flat on the lotus, like a cushion. Once again, reinforce strong sense of empty or absence of intrinsic, inherent entity of all the things and events, and in particularly oneself as a meditator, meditation of deity, meditation, the action of the meditation, and also those negativities to be purified. From the strong experience of sense of emptiness, from there, the deity of sound, that is, strong as sounds of syllable home, and sounds of syllable home gradually form a letter home, a syllable home. letter Hung gradually transforms into uh, Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva, one face, two arms, seated upon the moon disk. Two hands are crossed at his heart. Right holds a vajra, left holds a bell. At his heart is a moon disk, which is again flat like a cushion. With the syllable Hum at its center, standing, not flat, standing at the center of the moon disk. And the letters of the Vajrasattva's 100-syllable mantra, standing clockwise around its edge of the moon disk. Again, all the letters are standing, facing inward towards the syllable Hum. Vajrasattva is beautifully beautiful ornaments, clothes of celestial silk. Vajrasattva's crown is marked by letter A. Om, syllable Om. His throat is marked by syllable red R. And his heart is marked by syllable blue Hum. Also strongly imagine or strongly think that invites all the Buddhas from all the directions, and they dissolve into the Vajrasattva that you have visualized above your head. And strongly imagine, think that Vajrasattva, the power of the purification of all the Buddhas, deity represents the power of the purifications of all the Buddhas, is seated upon the moon and lotus seed on top of your head. And in front of the Vajrasattva, now the power of reliance or power of foundation to do the purification. And that is here holding the mind, taking refuge in three jewels, and holding the bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind. Strongly think the Buddha or Buddhas, Dharma, and Sangha here, who is represented Vajrasattva at above our head. The Vajrasattva that we have visualized, who is the representations of all the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And we take refuge, three jewels, as a, the teacher, teachings, and the Sangha. In order to oneself and all living beings, all sentient beings, particularly living beings, sentient beings who are going through very difficult times, to be free from all the difficulties and root, particularly root of difficulties, sources of those difficulties. Take the Buddhas as our teachers, mentors, Dharma as main means and methods to be applied, and Sangha as a supporters. With the mind taking refuge, then here and the next, holding the bodhicitta, the altruistic awakening mind. From our heart, from our heart, feel, think, all living beings, that include oneself, that includes all those, living beings who are going through difficult times, also living beings who are creating those difficulties. Without any sense of discrimination, any sense of particular selections. To have a strong sense of, cultivate strong sense of closeness, dear. And with that, want to work for the well-being of all living beings. No matter how small, no matter how insignificant our actions that might be, but sincerely, genuinely to share and think all living beings, not to exclude anybody. And holding that, now we will say the refuge and bodhicitta lines in Tibetan. Sanje cheda tsoji chanamala chanjo pado dane daso che dagi jinso jibe tsonamaji rola penje sanje dobara. So Sanje cheda tsoji chanamala chanjo pado dane daso che dagi jinso jibe tsonamaji rola penje sanje dobara. Sanje cheda tsoji chanamala chanjo pado dane daso che dagi jinso jibe tsonamaji rola penje sanje dobara. Strongly imagine that not only the taking refuge and generating bodhicitta that we have done here, imagine that all living beings, all sentient beings are also took refuge and generated bodhicitta. Then the power of regret. Here it is very, very helpful, useful to recall the how destructive, how painful, how unhelpful those afflictions such as anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, ignorance, and so forth, that we know from our own experiences, and that we know that what is, due to ignorance, due to anger, hatred, how much pain and sufferings have been caused, and that all these sufferings, particularly man-made sufferings, are fundamentally, basically coming from these afflictions. And actions, led by these afflictions. We know how destructive, how painful, right here and now, people who are suffering, due to those actions committed, created by aggressions, aggressive mental attitude, anger, ignorance. And not only these sufferings are taking place right here and now, we know from historically the pain and difficulties due to these actions continue for, sadly will continue for many, many years, decades. And their consequences, not only the pain and suffering that is going through right here and now, the consequences of these actions will, face not only the people, right here and now for many, many lifetimes. And also important to think ourselves right here and now. Luckily, we are not acting, that kind of very, aggressive, out of very gross anger, jealousy, envy, and so on and so forth. But the seeds are there. Luckily, due to our previous, actions, upbringing, conditions, we are not in that kind of, we are not acting that kind of very aggressive, that kind of very, not inflicting that kind of very painful for many living beings. But seeds, propensity is there. So therefore, it is very, very helpful and useful to think, to feel, as Shantideva has mentioned, if a poison snake is coiled in our lap, there's no room, there's no time to relax, not to act, to get rid of that. Similar to that, as long as these afflictions, at least in the seed, form of seeds, as long as they're there within our psyche, there's no room to feel peace, or there's no room to feel very relaxed. We must work, to reduce, to minimize, to eventually completely to eradicate, to purify. And that here it is important to feel deep sense of regret or remorse. Currently, ourselves is in that kind of situation, and many human beings are very grossly acting, under the power of afflictions. Deep sense of regret, remorse, be cultivated, and with that have a strong, determination, want to purify, want to, change, to reduce the growth, and eventually to get rid of, to eliminate from the seeds, from the propensities. And to do that is the, application of remedy, applying the remedy. And the main remedies or the antidotes are those cultivation of love, cultivation of compassion, cultivation of altruism, and cultivation of wisdom, realizing nature of impermanence, wisdom realizing nature of samsara, wisdom realizing nature of emptiness. These are the main antidotes to be applied to reduce initially, minimize, and eventually completely to eradicate. And here it is done with the recitation of Vajrasattva's 100-syllable mantra. And before reciting the mantra, while we are reciting the mantra, hold, from the Vajrasattva, while we are reciting the mantra, hold the visualization from the Vajrasattva who is above, visualized above our head, and at his heart, the letter Hum and 100-syllable mantra on top of the moon disk. In an aspect of multicolored lines, in the nature of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the Buddhas, great compassion, loving kindness, and wisdom realizing emptiness. In the aspect of multicolored lines, descend upon ourselves and upon all living beings, all living creatures. And due to receiving them in the aspect of multicolored lines, in the nature of love, compassion, altruism, wisdom realizing emptiness from the Vajrasattva and the 100-syllable mantras, think all the negativities and all those aggressive mental states, anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, ignorance, and their actions are purified. While saying the mantra, hold that visualization. So I will say the mantra 3 times, long mantra, and then short mantra 7 times. Then you hold, you can say the mantra while I'm saying, or you can just hold the visualization. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manopalaya Vajrasattva te no patishta, te do me bhava, sadhu kayo me bhava, sobo kayo me bhava, anoradu me bhava, sawasiti me bhava, sawakarma sutta, Chedamashirama Guru Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Savata Gada Vajramani Vajrabhava Samaya Sadhu Om Vajrasattva Sama Manobala Vajrasattva Dino Patishta Dedo Meba Soto Kayo Meba Sobo Kayo Meba Anoradu Meba Sawasiti Meba Sawa Karama Sutta Chedamashirama Kuru Ha 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 Bhagavan Savata Gada Vajramani Vajrabhava Samaya Sadhu Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manobala Vajrasattva Dino Patishta Dedo Meba Sadhu Kayo Meba Sopo Kayo Meba Anoradu Meba Sawasiti Meba Sawakarama Sutta Chedamashirama Kuru Ha 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 Bhagavan Savata Gada Vajramani Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sadhu Om Vajrasattva 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 Very strongly imagine due to the visualization of the Vajrasattva, taking refuge, generated bodhicitta, cultivated strong regret through the understanding of the negativities, and their seeds are still within our mental continuum, within all living beings' mental continuum, and strongly applying the application, the antidote, through the recitation of the Vajrasattva's 100-syllable mantra, and strongly visualizing in the aspect of multicolored lives, in the nature of love to all the Buddhas, love, compassion, altruism, and wisdom, realizing emptiness, receiving, descending upon us, upon all living beings, all the negativities, particularly those afflictions, hatred, anger, aggression, jealousy, envy, ignorance, and their propensities, their seeds, are completely purified. Cultivate strong sense of joy that managed to do this, apply the antidote. And at the same time, have a cultivate strong sense of determination that from now on, we'll try all our best to reduce, to minimize, and eventually to eradicate these afflictions, their seeds, and all those actions committed under the power of afflictions, will not repeat those again. And now, strongly think the Vajrasattva due to that strong determination not to repeat these negative actions again, Vajrasattva strongly imagine Vajrasattva is pleased, and says, my spiritual child of the essence, all the negativities, obscurations, and degenerated vows have now been completely purified. Hearing that, cultivate the sense of joy that today you are able to do the purification, able to purify negativities and their seeds. And with that joy, now visualize lotus, the moon, moon disk, and the Vajrasattva gradually dissolves into the syllable home, which is at its heart, at the center of the moon disk. And syllable home dissolves into multicolored lights. And that light dissolves into oneself, into all living beings. And strongly feel that we receive all the blessings, inspirations from the, all the Buddhas and our spiritual teachers. People who have received Vajrayana initiations, you can feel, you can imagine your body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the Vajrasattva's body, speech, and mind. Oh yeah, so that is a brief leading the the practice, Vajrasattva practice, and so now we will move to what you call the questions and answer session, and here there are 4, 5, 6 questions, already written questions, and Peter, who's going to read the questions? Do you know?
So we thought it would be nice if those people who are asking the questions read them out. So first it would be, what do you think? First Ruth?
Okay, yeah.
So when it's your turn to read a question, if you could unmute and then read your question, and that would work well.
Oh yeah. So the first is Ruth. Ruth Kempson, can you read your questions?
Yeah, inevitably, I think I now have answers to what I wrote, but having thought about it more since Friday, here we go. You described for us a process of visualizing the Sri Vajrasattva's heart as sending out myriad rays. We just had this in request to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they then responding, but purification pouring into Vajrasattva. But here's the extra bit. He's then sending back such rays. I think you described this as a to and fro process and very powerful. So now I've got a 2-part question. First, is this particular part of the purification only available as the highest yoga tantra practice, or is it available to all of us? And now the second one, which really is very much absorbs me at the moment. In these very troubled times, is it acceptable to visualize us all together, the vast family of beings in our world, as one unit, like a team, with His Holiness Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa, or whoever, sitting with us, leading us through this practice of acknowledging our mistakes, pledging never to repeat them, and so on, and still, as a single unit, visualizing us together, as a team entering this to and fro process. This feels very beautiful, but is it too much of an extension, just to continue a bit, to serve its function, which is actually to purify oneself in order to be able to nurture others? That's it.
The first question is, as you said, is it only available as a highest yoga? No, it is, that the process of visualization, if you are visualizing, and also the descending and ascending, all these can be done any deity practice, either not necessarily exclusively as yoga tantra. If you do the single Vajrasattva, Kriya, Charya, and it is perfectly fine if you do this visualization. And the second part, as we have done, it is really up to the individuals. If individuals want to focus purification on particular difficulties, then it will be good to focus on that particular difficulties. Like, for example, if we want to focus on what is happening in the world, particularly in Ukraine, people who are Ukraine people or people who are suffering, if we want to do that, it can be just focus those beings. It is really up to the individual how to extend, or do more focus. And there isn't that sort of what you call fixed. You can't do this much. So it is really up to the individual. And anyway. Okay. So the next question is from Paul Weston. Yeah.
Are you there, Paul? Can't see you.
Okay. Paul.
Should I read it for him?
Yeah, okay. Read it, Peter.
I don't know what's happened. So I think he always attends, and so he'll probably want to listen to it afterwards. Something must have happened. So should I read it then?
Yes.
So Paul's question is, does this practice need to be added to our daily practice in order to gain most benefit? Or is it acceptable to do it as and when we can? Also, does one have to kneel on one knee as a teacher did while practicing?
Okay. So now, it is up to the individual saying, does this practice need to be added to our daily practice in order to gain most benefits? It will be nice to do in a regular basis, particularly, I think that people who have, like, for example, full sadhana, full meditational deity manuals, particularly high yoga tantra, I think the purification practice is always in some part of that meditational manual, sadhana, called sadhana, meditation manual of particular deity. Some are long, some are short. So people who have that kind of commitment, to do every day, and then purification practice is always there. Or some people, even if people who don't have that kind of commitment, or that kind of commitment, but people who do the 7-limb prayer, prostration, the offering, again, the purification, which is very simple practice, 7-limb practice. Again, third one is purification. Don't need to be that kind of elaboration, visualization, but simply applying, as I mentioned, beginning of the class, simply applying those 4 powers. Doesn't need to be visualization, doesn't need to be a recitation, but simply applying the 4 powers, be present, and then you can do that. I will not say in a daily, but in a regular basis, or sometimes it is quite useful when you feel there's difficulties that you are facing, challenges that you are facing. Although difficulties, challenges might be, externally manifested, but external manifestations are very much, starting from the internal mental states, so then focus on purification. That is also sometimes occasionally focus on purification, and particularly when we are facing difficulties. So I usually say in a regular basis, not daily basis. And that is one thing. So the last part, when you say, doesn't need to nail down, is that nail down, that you're asking that question? It doesn't need to be like that. Though the body gesture make some, express some sort of seriousness or some kind of, the respect or whatever. The main thing is the mental application. Of course, bodily, some kind of, the body gesture, body action provides or creates sometimes very conducive, the conditions. But doesn't need, not very necessarily kneel down or like that. It is good to have a good body posture, sitting posture, and to do the purification. Okay, so then the third lead.
Yes, thank you, Geshe. You've already more or less answered my question, but here you are. Do you have any tips on making more alive and accessible the injunction at the end of the 3 visualization of remedial actions? The one that I first mentioned, that are very physically, involved about the different, the body, speech, and mind. Feel completely empty of these problems and negativities. They no longer exist anywhere. They are gone forever. They are non-existent. At times, I feel it is mainly more about the daily slow eroding or grounding down of very ingrained unwholesome habits. I obviously is this connection between the conventional and the ultimate, which suddenly I found it a bit difficult to do.
Yes, I think there are 2 things that we need to be aware of. That when we are meditating on emptiness, we are not saying delusions, afflictions, pain, sufferings do not exist. What we are saying is they do not exist intrinsically, inherently. That understanding is really something important, not to mixed with at the end, when we do after end of the purification, we imagine our afflictions, delusions are completely purified. That is in a process of training our mind, particularly in the Vajrayana practice. In the Vajrayana practice, as I mentioned, certain stages, there are lots of strong imagination, need to play with our imagination, imagining ourselves through the process of meditation, imagining ourselves as a deity. So in the Vajrayana teachings and practices, there are these things. So these 2 should not be mixed together. So that, in other words, on the one hand, meditation on emptiness, meditation on absence of intrinsic. That level, we're not saying negativities do not exist and afflictions do not exist. What we are saying is simply they do not exist in and of themselves. That is the one level. So another level is, when we at the end of the purification, particularly in the Vajrayana, we strongly imagine, all the negativities are purified. But in reality, for our out of the meditation, we know from ourselves, the anger is still there. Sadly, attachment is still there. But during the meditation, particularly in the Vajrayana teachings, some certain level, certain stage, the imagination is very important. And that is what here, I think that's what you are saying. That's what I think that might be the,
yes.
What you're asking. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
I think so. Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay, now the next is Pick Pen Go.
Yes, Tashidala Keshila. I often hear that the meditation on emptiness is the most powerful purification method. I was just wondering, among the many, why is meditation on emptiness the most powerful one?
Okay, because it is most powerful in the sense, when we really try to cultivate understanding of emptiness, through the understanding of emptiness, that really counteracts, that understanding really counteracts the root of affliction. Our attachment, aversion, anger, jealousy, all these afflictions, arise from the ignorance, particular ignorance, that is ignorance of ignorance of that things and events, believing that things and events exist inherently, intrinsically. So that ignorance, that fundamental misunderstanding is the root of all other afflictions. So when we meditate, when we really manage to cultivate wisdom realizing emptiness, that wisdom realizing emptiness really tackles that misunderstanding, that misbelieving, that things and events have intrinsic or inherent nature. So therefore, understanding of emptiness or cultivation of wisdom realizing emptiness is the most powerful antidote. It is said very often, though love, strong sense of love can reduce anger, aversion, but strong love, compassion, altruism cannot, be antidote to antidote of fundamental ignorance. Strong altruism can, can sort of use as an antidote to eliminate, to get rid of self-centered mind. But the bodhicitta cannot act as an antidote for the fundamental ignorance. However, having the realization of emptiness not only acts as an antidote to the fundamental ignorance, that will act as an antidote to attachment, aversion, and all other afflictions. So that's why the Buddhist teachers very often say cultivation of selflessness or cultivation of the emptiness is the most powerful wisdom realization to be cultivated. Okay.
My second question is about the 4 types of karma. There is the throwing karma, environmental karma, the result similar to cause and similar to behavior. Are the 4 powers, let's say power of reliance, power of regret, that individually as an antidote or attack each of this karma?
Not necessarily there is a particular what you call the connections. However, for example, if we cultivated the first power of reliance, definitely it will reduce some of those out of 4 karmas. That will reduce some of those karmas, no doubt. But there isn't as far as I know, there isn't a particular, saying this power, relate to this karma. There isn't that sort of things. Okay. Oh yeah. Thank you. Okay. Now the next one is Henry Tripp.
This is my mistake. This is a question for the live Q&A for the Foundation of Buddhist Thought course. So this is for later. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
This is the wrong place. So maybe the next question is Karina.
Okay, next question then. Karina. Torin? Karina?
She is here. Karina,
Okay.
Unmute.
Okay, so then can you read, or I'll read? Do you happen to know if there are any places offering Vajrasattva initiation in the coming months? I don't know. That's very good. Sorry. How often is it to recommend to do the Vajrasattva practice? At any time of the day that is more suitable? How often? That part of the question I answered earlier. It is up to the individual. It is up to the individual. And it mentioned time. And there is this tradition to say, that if you like to do Vajrasattva practice in a regular basis or a daily basis, separately from within the particular meditational manual, separately, if you want to do the purification, Vajrasattva, then some teachers recommend in the evening. But there isn't that particular, private time when should be done, morning, afternoon, or evening. It is up to the individual which, time is suited. The morning or evening or afternoon, you can do that. Okay.
Thank you, Geshe. I'm sorry, my computer just always happens to be slow when the crucial time happens.
So your computer.
Yes, I'm glad that you could read the questions, and thank you for the answers.
Your computer may need purification.
Yes, I think so. Maybe I'll do Vajrasattva for the computer.
Okay. Then there is in the chat shows, there is one question, Bessie. If there is time, could I ask a question? And not to worry if there isn't. Okay. So we will. Ani Chamba Sammo question. What to do when the enthusiasm do fail during the practice? Long life. Okay. Enthusiasm. So it is best. My answer to that question is: session should be shorter. Whatever session that you do, it is very important to have a shorter session, but more, stronger or with the enthusiasm. instead of long session and less enthusiasm. It is said very often by those great meditators, your session should be, meditation session or practice session should be end before you get bored. There are many reasons for that. So that is my, your answer to your question. Enthusiasm to fail during
Yes,
practice.
thank you, Rinpoche.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And long live.
So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now that we are running out the time, I will take one question from Elena and then next question from Bessie. Okay.
Thank you, Geshe. You've been talking about seeing the deity as a manifestation of bliss and emptiness, and that aspect of bliss. It's very difficult even to imagine from the level of gross mind, and it feels like it requires a very, very supple state of mind. And I wonder if these teachings that you've been giving is like saying that we really need to do both Guru Yoga and purification to make the mind more able to even understand what you mean by bliss.
Okay, so yes, in this kind of session, just one session, it is difficult to go all the detail as I mentioned at the beginning. So you're right, in the Vajrayana practice and the visualization of the deities, once arising into deities is done in the sphere of emptiness and bliss. But as you mentioned, bringing that into the meditation is not simple, not easy. So I deliberately left that part and also certain other parts. But it is useful, because what you call as I mentioned, not here today, but in the other time I mentioned, the practice, purification practice is done with the Vajrayana, within the Vajrayana, highest yoga tantra, and so on and so forth. And also without Vajrayana element, pure Sutrayana. So, and this, in that kind of atmosphere, in that kind of structure, difficult to explain bliss and all those things. But you can, if you know how to bring bliss and emptiness in the process of visualizing Vajrasattva, that's perfectly fine. You can do that. Okay? Yeah. Okay, the last question. Bessie.
Okay, so this isn't really very Vajrasattva connected. It's more to do with prayer.
Okay.
So I went to an abbey with my son today, and he wasn't very happy really to be there. But so there was a candle, and it said, light a candle for Ukraine. And you mentioned here, bringing in, the situation in the world. And he said to me, but what are you talking about? They created the cause for this, Mummy. And what can we do? And so, I mean, I hear this thing about, how the group prayer and, we want to make prayers and want positivity for the world. And I've heard about it being a very positive thing, the energy created in a group. And then I tried to explain a little bit about, we are also creating a generous atmosphere in ourselves, so that can affect the world. Anyway, I just wanted to know what you said. What would you say, Geshe, about this?
Okay. I think these are the very complicated, very, very, very complicated situation. We can't have a clear, in that answer to explain, particularly young boy, very want to play football rather than going to abbey. And in that kind of mindset.
You just did it.
Yeah. But it is, there isn't that simple answer. Even if we're asked to Buddha, I don't think Buddha has a simple answer to explain why this, the situation. Of course, it has a, people, when we talk about people who know the history, they will talk about 100 years of history, background, blah, 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 all those things. People who talk about, what's called the financial situation, or all those things. So there are lots of factors there. I don't know, very difficult to answer that question. What here we're talking about is simply in our mental level, as a spiritual seeker, what we can do. And that's what we are talking about. As I mentioned it right at the middle of our practice, some people may find it a little bit difficult, but I feel doing this recitation, visualization, bringing in our mind, those people who are suffering, whether it's real, the tangible benefits there or not, I don't know. But at least we are mentally thinking about them, and it is an action. Mentally thinking itself is an action, and there is some sort of positive, and I don't know how much that positive will be there as a real. So it is not easy to answer, have a simple answer to the situation, let alone that kind of very complicated, even a one-to-one, action. My action to this particular situation is not that simple. It involves many factors. And here, many people are involved, and many things are involved, very difficult. Though we can point finger to particular people, this and that, but not easy to have a clear answer to this kind of situation. Okay, thank you. We'll stop here today, and so we'll do the 21 Tara prayers and the dedication. Om Je Ma Pama Drama La Cha Tse Chanze Drama Nyama Pam Jene Geje Lo Tang Tang Jigden Sum Gwen Chudi She Kesa Jewa Leni Chanze Tongge Tawa Gwen Kanwa Jene Zigbe She Rama Tongda Tsoba Namanje Rabdo Chewe Rabaram Chanze Seng Jone Je Peme Chane Nabara Je Jimba Zundu Gado She Zaba Samden Ju Nyam Chanze Tejin Shebe Zodo Taye Nabara Jawa Je Malu Paru Jimba Tobe Jawe Seji Shindo Dem Chanze Doda Ranghong Yige Doda Choda Namga Gang Jiden Dombo Shabdi Nende Loba Meba Guba Nem Chanze Jajin Mela Chamba Longla Nazo Wanju Che Jombo Rola Tisa Namanda Nijun Tsodi Dune De Chanze Teje Chadang Peje Paru Tugu Rabdo Jom Egon Yunja Shabdi Nende Mebara Tuba Shindo Baram Chanze Dure Jiba Chenbo Digi Pao Nambara Jom Chuji Shene Chunye Denze Dao Tamje Malu Sem Chanze Gunjo Somze Chaje Seme Toga Nambara Jem Malu Choje Kolo Jembe Rangi Uji Sonama Chum Chanze Rabdo Gawa Jebe Ujin Uji Tenwa Bem Sheba Rabshe Dudara Dudan Jikden Wando Zem Chanze Sashi Gyongwe Chon tamje goba nuba nyem tonye yewa yige honge pongba tamje nambara dom changze dawe dombo o jenba tamje shindo baram rebe trene waba mene tabara shindo rabasem changze kebe tama me barwe chengwe une ne ejang yung kune koke daye pongne nambara jom changze sashi ngola chake tirgi nujing shabye tong tonye jenze yige honge remba tumbo namne gem changze dema gema shema nyangen deshin junye sowa omda yangda denbe dewa chambo chomba nye changze kune koraba ka daye lune nambara gem ige jube ngane kwebe reba hongle doma nye changze dure shamne dabe honge nabe sabe nye rera meda rada beje jigden somna yewa nye changze laye tsoye nabe reda dajen chana nam dara nije peje yige dena malu pane sem changze laye tsonama jebo tada mem jidem kune koja gawa jibe zeda melama ngeba sem changze nima dawa jebe jinye pola veraba sem hara nije dodara yi Shindo Chakwe Rimne Sem Changze Tinyi Sumnam Gwebe Shiwe Tuta Yang Da Dem Dudang Rona Nujun Som Jomba Turi Rapcho Nyi Zawe Ngati Deba De Ta Changze Wane Nishu Tsachi Gewa Di Gyoga Sera Mey ye zongzo xin, Sera Mey ye le zhong, Taba gunye toba Changjo semjo rinpoche, Ma je bana ma je jo je, Jeba nyamba neba yang, Kong ne kong du pewara jo. Kanre rave kore shen kamande penda de malu jome jere sewa tenzin jazo shabe sede pato tenjuro Oh yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.